When you think about classic horror movies, one of the first films to come to mind is Wes Craven's Scream. The screenplay for this film, written by Kevin Williamson, was inspired by the University of Florida student murders in 1990. While the iconic scenes from Scream hold a place in the hearts of movie fanatics, the real-life tragedy that preceded the film left a much deeper impact on the Gainesville, Florida community than any movie ever could. As the summer of 1990 came to a close, thousands of University of Florida students flocked to campus for the start of the new school year. The heart of campus once more began to bustle with students moving into dorms, going to classes, and studying in the libraries. Football season was fast approaching, and the vibrant spirit of the university had never been more ready to kick off the school year. But, lurking in the shadows of this peaceful community was a killer who would, in just 3 short days, shatter the sense of security shared by 92,000 residents of Gainesville, Florida. In those few dark days, 4 UF students and 1 Santa Fe College student were viciously mutilated and murdered. The killer, nicknamed the Gainesville Ripper, decimated the lives of many and left the community stunned. The first attacks took place on the morning of Friday, August 24th. 2 University of Florida freshmen, Sonia Larson, age 18, and Christine Powell, age 17, were in their off-campus apartment, located just off of Southwest 13th Street, when the Ripper broke in, assaulted, and murdered them. The girls were found on August 26th by the local authorities. And their apartment complex, the Williamsburg Village Apartments, is the only complex still standing today in Gainesville, where the murders took place. The following day, Saturday the 25th, another murder occurred, this one far more perverse. The Ripper was said to have broken into the apartment of 18-year-old Chris DeHoyt, only to find it empty. He made himself at home there, and waited until she returned the following morning. Krista was raped and stabbed many times, just like the previous victims. But this time, however, the killer decapitated her. When the local police discovered Krista's body, the shock value of the murder was unparalleled. The Ripper had succeeded in making a name for himself, and his horrifying legacy continued to appall the community with the uncovering of each murder. The final victims were Manny Tabata and his roommate, Tracy Pauls, both 23-year-old UF seniors. They were found dead on Monday the 27th at the off-campus Gatorwood Apartments, which have since been destroyed. The Ripper fought Tabata and ultimately killed him, and then taped Tracy's mouth, assaulted her, and posed her body. However, the body of Tabata was left as it was, only to be discovered by the police shortly thereafter. And then, just as suddenly as the murders began, they ended. The sheer panic caused by these events led to a mass exodus of students from the university, and almost 34,000 Gainesville residents fled the area. Many students withdrew themselves from classes, and some even enrolled at other universities to avoid the pandemonium. As a result of the chaos, the university closed for an entire week, trying to allow time for the student population to recover. The campus, now empty, was like a silent tribute to the students who had needlessly died at the hands of a deeply twisted man. Just a few days after Tabata and Paulus were found, the police turned up with a suspect. His name was Edward Humphrey, and he was a local Gainesville resident. Humphrey was 18 years old, emotionally disturbed, and lived in the same neighborhood as some of the first victims. Several of the neighbors of the complex described times in which Humphrey would display his large hunting knife collection, and it was also noted that he often took late-night excursions into the local woods. His suspicious behavior tipped off the police, but upon testing his semen sample to that found at the crime scene, it was determined that he was not a match. Humphrey was further detained for an unrelated battery charge and remained in jail until 1991. However, the real Gainesville Ripper was still out there somewhere, haunting the UF community. Not too long after this, in a small town called Ocala, just 45 minutes south of Gainesville, a man named Danny Rolling was arrested for the robbery of a Winn-Dixie grocery store. Rolling was identified by Louisiana police as a possible suspect for a string of similar murders to the ones in Gainesville. Upon further investigation and DNA testing, it became clear that Danny Rolling was, in fact, the Gainesville Ripper. Rolling pled guilty to the student murder charges, and the campsite he left in Gainesville was searched extensively by the police. There, they found a series of audio tapes of Rolling speaking directly to his family, as well as an eerie country song he had written himself.
I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you, but it was hard to say. I couldn't touch you, and all you wanna be deep or shallow.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Rollins.
Down the
Mr.
path
Rollins.
you choose
Mr. Rollins.
to follow.
Mr. Rollins.
Tell me, baby, what?
In interviews with the police, Rolling mentioned that he himself was not the one who was responsible for the crimes to which he had pled guilty. Rather, a demon named Yanad was the one inciting Rolling to commit the crimes. This statement parallels the plot of the third Exorcist movie, which came out just before the murders. It is thought that Rolling scoped out some of his victims at the local Gainesville Regal Cinemas at a showing of The Exorcist, following them from there. In October of 2006, Rolling was finally executed in Stark, Florida for his crimes. The student reaction following the murders varied vastly. Some students fled, some stayed in town and slept in groups with their friends, guarding themselves with weapons, and some students took it upon themselves to sustain the memory of their peers. One of the most prominent memorials in the Gainesville area is the 34th Street Memorial Wall. As you pan your way down the extensive wall, you see painted advertising for organizations and businesses, graffiti tags, and mural work. But on one large section of this wall, the names of the 5 victims are listed next to the word "Remember." This touching tribute serves as a permanent reminder of the tragedy endured by the community, and despite the few cases of vandalism on the wall, the memorial remains intact as a remembrance of the people that Sonia Larson, Christina Powell, Krista Hoyt, Manuel Tabata, and Tracy Paulus were before they just became victims. On the other side of Florida's campus lies a much more recent tribute to these students, one that grows in its meaning every day. A series of 5 trees were planted along the side of Library East, installed as an ever-strengthening reminder of what the community had endured. This memorial, donated by the physical plant at the university, is less commonly known than the wall, but still holds great meaning to the victims' families. In addition to the physical memorials dedicated to the students, many scholarship funds have been set up in the memory of them. The Sonia Larson Memorial Scholarship alone has contributed $113,000 to students since its installation. The tangible memorials that have meant so much to the students of UF and the family members of the victims have survived an astounding amount of time. In 2015, on the 25th anniversary of the murders, University President Kent Fox hosted the victims' families back at UF once more. Here, they met at the Bauman Center for a service honoring their children. As they reflected on the impact the murders had on their lives, it became abundantly clear that while a great loss had been suffered at the hands of Danny Rolling, what would be remembered was not his monstrous actions, but rather the memories of the students. The UF community did not allow these events to define it, but rather they stepped forward to honor and conquer the fear that had been unleashed in their town. Where a sense of security had been ripped away, a deeply rooted community had been created, one that still holds strong today.